Hello, hero. It's Lucy Lannon in Halloween jammies because today's the day if you're seeing this live. Happy Halloween, happy Samhain, whatever it is that you celebrate today. I hope you have a good one. I'm very laid back and in my sort of mode right now. But I am also slightly concerned about the sound for this reading because there's been problems with the jack that connects to my camera. So if there is diminished sound in any way, I do apologise. I'm going to do my best to keep it the best that it can be in this reading, but I'm told that the content needs to get out there whatever it's like. I'm also going to turn this light the right way. There's like need for adjustment here in all piles because I wouldn't be speaking so much to this if that wasn't the case. So I guess that means that you might need this reading because we are about to talk about what resources are available to you. We are going to explore 5 elements in which you have stuff that is either unseen, unconscious, or recognised, but in a way where you haven't really tapped into it so far. And we're going to kind of look at how it can help your situation at the moment. I'm not going to speak too much about everybody's circumstance, so much as just what it is that can help you. And I guess you can kind of work backwards from that into how it relates to your situation now. This is partly because even with pile differentiation, I am reading collectively for a large audience, so take what resonates, leave the rest. But in terms of situational readings, getting into the nitty gritty, I have done a full Utober. This is possibly one of the last readings that you're seeing in that sort of thing. Check out the Utober playlist for stuff speaking to specific circumstance. I instead want to create a 3-power reading today that sort of talks more generally about how the things that you already have can assist you. Because I feel like there's been a current recently in the personal readings I've done, and indeed in my own development, where people are looking to the external to solve stuff for them and not taking full acknowledgement of the stuff that's already in their lives, which could really help them out. So if that's you, this one is for you. Okay, so I'm going to say pile 1 is going to be the Buffy Tarot. Pile 2 is going to be the VAV Marseille from 1650, which you may have enjoyed in my Marseille Mini A to Z Lucky Dip tarots before. And pile 3 is going to be the Tarot of the Divine. Okay, so without further ado, let's get started with pile 1. Hello there, pile 1. If I am speaking just a little bit quieter, it's because I'm recording this late at night. And I did say in the intro, I don't know whether I'm having mic issues in terms of the connection to my recording device, so I apologise if that's the case, but hopefully you can still hear me fine, or at least the captions can pick up on what I'm saying. Let's get started with your reading with the Buffy Tarot. What resources are available to my pile 1? Okay, so let's first speak to the material, the body, issues of money, issues of career, that kind of a thing. I think that you're somebody who can very easily branch out on their own. I don't know whether you're currently an entrepreneur or whether that's something you've been thinking about, but you're certainly extremely creative and expressive. And I think that that is particularly when you're working alone on something. That's not to say that you can't collaborate with others, but one of the personal resources that you sometimes forget about might be that actually when left to your own devices, you come up with things in an incredibly ingenious way. And that is despite the circumstances that are kind of thrust upon you, with this Hermit card being Oz, by not just outer circumstances, but also emotional changes in the people around you, or even in yourself, right? You may be somebody who has overcome trauma and has transformed it into, I want to say, a coaching business or something to do with healing other people through your art, because Oz is a musician. So it doesn't mean that you are a musician, but certainly there's a process of being an alchemist in a way, transmuting energies that could have been harmful into something that is helpful to other people. You could even be a reader, and hello and welcome. Let me know in the comments, but there's something here about going out on your own, going off on your own journey, perhaps diverging from what's expected in a way that is extremely creative, extremely inspired, I want to say. Or going off on a sort of seeker's journey, a kind of eat, pray, love type thing in a less sickening way, and coming back with jewels of information, with gold about the universe, right? It makes me think of how Oz went off on his own personal journey of discovery, where he kind of learned to control his animalistic nature and learned to be more in tune with himself through meditation, through seeking. I think you might be well-travelled, or you have that Jupiterian energy, and if that's not the case and you've been kind of fixed in place, you certainly have the capability within you to transmute the energy of what you've been given into something that is beneficial to all. Whether or not it's something you've tapped into is debatable, and that may be why you're hearing it in this reading, but certainly you do work well alone, and you have that alchemist quality in a metaphysical sense. You transform one kind of an energy coming in into another kind of an energy going out. You may be a master manifester in that sense. With all these stars down here, there is something magical about you. And actually, I'm noticing that this is one of my favourite decks, and you've come out as my favourite character, or at least the character that was my favourite growing up. So instantly, aside from just I like you, there is a sense of divine favour with this, is what I want to say. Not just because I like you, but because that is Spirit's way of showing me that Spirit likes you, that you are lucky, or that you are here with a very grounded sense of the job that you have to do. You may be quite earth dominant, or you may just have an ease of flow with taking things that are non-physical and transforming them into physical resources. Almost makes me wonder why you're here, but maybe it's that you had to hear that from someone else, right? With this page of stakes and harmony, I think you bring harmony, right? You bring creativity to other people. I think there's a purity to you which can be transformed into a source of income, I want to say. For some of you, you have a platform, or you publicize yourself as a personality or as a character in some way, and other people really respond to it, partly because of something to do with innocence or a childlike quality. And I want to say childlike, not childish. The unicorns make me think that there is something pure about the way that you come across the outside world, which if you haven't tapped into on a financial level, you absolutely can. That doesn't mean that some of you aren't in jobs where things are a bit more adult, shall we say. But I think that your angle on that is one of innocence, and that is why people flock to you. Remember, Harmony, before she became a vampire, was very popular. There is a sense that whether or not you're willing to hack this or tap into it or whatever, you're capable of entering the creative realm with a great deal of attention focused upon you and turning that attention into material resources. So read likes, followers, donations. You might be someone who runs a Patreon, for instance, or somebody who's capable of having, I want to say, like fans or stands even, if I can mention that in a sort of healthy way, where people will support you, whatever it is that you want to do next. I also feel that Harmony's energy is very different to Oz's. So in terms of creative outlets, you might have more than one thing that you're very good at. Writing may come into it with this letter down here. Certainly there is something striking or something that draws people in about your appearance as well. And I want to say that you might be renowned for being a spiritual seeker, or that one day you will be, just because of all these candles everywhere and the fact that it is a stakes suit, which is equivalent to the suit of wands. But again, overall, it's this sense of alchemy and innocence that's coming through. If your money isn't great right now and you're partly tapping into this reading to see how to improve it, my honest answer is take the stuff that people enjoy you for in a social sense and monetize the fuck out of it, okay? Because people want to be around you just to see what you come up with next, just to see what you're wearing, see what you're creating, see how you're speaking about the things that you believe in, how you're writing about them. And I think that you can transform that into not just an online following or a brand cohesion or whatever, but an actual source of income in some fashion. And maybe if I'm here telling you this and you haven't tapped into that, you're hearing this reading so that you can take that first step. With the Two of Scythes in reverse, I also feel that you're a person who is usually quite decisive when it comes to financial matters. I'm hearing that you don't go back on decisions, you don't pull out of contracts. When you invest, you go in, right? Perhaps in the past you've had negative experiences because of that, in terms of like gambling on a certain prospect or beginning businesses that didn't entirely pan out. And again, because of this outfit, I'm thinking in a sort of sartorial sense, although that won't be for everyone. But the indecision of the Two of Swords in the upright is counted out in terms of you know where you're going, you know what you're doing. And although that's a personal quality, I feel like it's in your practical area of this reading, because you have a leader vibe, you have a very cardinal energy. Your chart may be extremely cardinal dominant. You are a trendsetter. You are somebody who sets the precedent for other people, because you don't need to believe that other people will want what you're doing to just do it and make it and be that way. And I think that because of that quality, your output is quite either you're very prolific, or there's a range of stuff that you don't really see with other people who use the forms of media that you use. So say you are a musician and a writer and whatever else, there may be people who are very good at being prolific in that particular area, but not in many areas at once. And again, there's an energy here of you monetizing the variety of your personality in a very decisive way. So if you haven't done that, if you're not running a Patreon, if you're not making money off that Instagram following that you have, now is the time, my dude. I wish I had these kinds of qualities, because I am kind of jack of all trades energy, but I think you have learnt to put into lots of different things and have your fingers in lots of different pies in a way that's not dilettante energy, it's not scattered, it's very decisive and spirited, and people pick up on it as a reflection of the scope of your personality and not as a negative in terms of the way that you come across. So people look at you and they crave in their own lives the kind of variety that you embody in your interests. And this is a personal bias, not a message from spirit, but it's a rare thing, right? To meet somebody genuinely interesting who has something to say in various realms and not just in one area is quite impressive. And people will put belief, time, money, energy, attention into that kind of a thing in a way that I feel you can benefit from. And and sort of turn into long-term stability with this transmuting energy that you do have. Okay, let's go into emotional resources, connections around you, that kind of thing. We've got the Hierophant in reverse, the Five of Cups in reverse, and the Devil in reverse. Again, this is an echo of this kind of energy. I don't feel that you're a conformist. I think that emotionally you have a great deal of independence from the norms that other people have. I think that the collective idea of what is good and proper, or even notions of mental health versus instability or whatever, are not things that you share. And I don't mean that in a derogatory sense or even an ableist sense. I mean it in the sense that you can very easily diverge from the consensus narrative in order to create things that are genuinely exciting in the world. And that is also in terms of the way that you see your personal life. You may be somebody who has atypical relationships that are very well understood to you and those involved, that might be frowned upon in kind of consensus culture. Or you may come from a cultural background that you have diverged from in some fashion. I think of Giles as Giles, but also Ripper, right? So he is this stuffy librarian who's in this very prestigious tradition of watchers that have an extensive knowledge of demonology and things like that. But he's also a guy who was a punk magician back in the day and did some dicey things and has experiential skills that cannot be gained within polite society. And he can wear either of those hats at any given time. And it's because of that sort of emotional dexterousness and that broad skill set that he's such an asset to the group, because he can be leading, he can be fatherly, any gender, right? And he can be kind of black hat or white hat in a way. He can take the very sort of traditional academia kind of a stuffy perspective and fit in those circles, but he can also kick it with the punk magicians, the demons, the witches, and sort of not just fit into those circles but contribute to them very directly. So you may be somebody as well who in your social world has people who have resources that speak to prestigiousness, that speak to the efficacy and long-standing reputation of certain institutions, but also you can kick it with, I want to say, the thugs or the outcasts, or I'm getting like space drunks is what me and my friend refer to it as, but the kind of people that you would meet in a cantina bar on the edges of a galaxy, right, that you make deals with, and they're a bit shady but they're also great. Like, I think you blend in to all possible worlds. If you're from a particularly strict religious or cultural background, and again, not for all of you, but if that speaks to you, I think you can blend in that realm very well and be very sort of, you come across as very obedient to the right people, but actually you have this kind of secret other life, these secret qualities where you can be a bit more wild. There is a sense of wildness so far in this reading, a sense of being untamed in the way that you express yourself, being somebody who can blend in with polite society and attain status in the traditional ways and modes and fit in with people of privilege, but can also kind of take off those kind of clothes and drop the mask, and also fit in with people who are much more aligned with your inner perspective, your creativity, your spontaneity, maybe even with other seekers, other people on presumably a spiritual or a magical paradigm if you're on this channel. With the Five of Cups reversed, I feel like if you left behind any notion of traditional circles, friends, jobs even, you don't really have any regrets with this. I think it's been your awakening. I do feel that might be career related just because of the episode Anne, which this refers to, where Buffy sort of takes a new job in Los Angeles and leaves everything behind. And then through that experience, she meets people who sort of shunt her back into her purpose in some way. So I think there's a sense of you leaving behind a social circle that were a bit more, I want to say, stuffy, or a bit more sort of from privilege, or a bit less aware of the wider world, less Jupiterian than you come across. And in leaving those people behind, perhaps even temporarily, or expanding beyond that in a secret way, you've almost come back to it as the master of both realms. And socially, you're very adept, right? You move through different circles in a really positive way. And you can speak at a deep emotional level to the needs of both groups, which again is quite a rare quality, right? It's one thing to fit in both worlds in a sense of outwardly looking like you belong. It's quite another to know the deepest hopes and fears of each group, and to be able to speak to those things in a way where everybody regards you equally, whatever their background, as having a kind of creativity, innocence, and having admirable qualities or a sense of fun that can operate within several sectors. So I think, again, that's a resource that you may not be conscious of. You may be conscious of the journey you've taken, but not necessarily how adaptable it's made you. Excuse me, hiccups confirmation. To act within all these different places and to meet all different kinds of people. And if you've ever felt lonely because you're kind of outside of both of these sections, right? You're not the stuffy librarian type, but you're also not completely fitting in with the archetypal punks, right? I want to say that's your skill set, that's your resource, right? The not fitting into either is actually where you fit in. And if you want to make friends, look to both of those realms and try to look for people who are like you and have done both, whether or not they've given up one or the other, right? Be that they've left something more conventional, or they were punk and they've like sold out, right? I think people who also move between are going to be a really incredible resource for you emotionally moving through into the future. But right now, really what's coming out is that you're an incredible emotional resource for others, right? So there's this sense of wearing many hats, living many lives, and that showing up in your social resources, even if some of those people have to be low-key or sneaky links, or people you sneak out at night to go and see if you're from a very traditional family or something. I think that the fact that you can blend with all is, in the end, one of your greatest strengths. There's also, with the devil in reverse, a sense that you have resisted temptation to be able to do this. So you may have walked with either people who were obsessed with status, education, academia, religious tradition, etc., etc., or people who perhaps came from backgrounds of addiction, of excommunication, of being ejected from institutions, from families, from traditional ways of being. I think you're an ally to people who've gone through it, but you never quite, although you blended with those circles, you never took the risks that those people took. And in the same way, you were never lured in by the promise of the more traditional lifestyle from an emotional perspective. You may have had the trappings of status, but I don't think that you were ever egoic enough to be status obsessed. Nor do I think that in your wildness you ever went truly off the rails with stuff or got out of control, because I think you saw in your social circles people who, in one way or another, got lost in the source or got kind of pulled into something else, right? Moving forward to spirituality, direct creativity, that kind of thing. We have the Judgment in reverse, the Seven of Stakes in reverse, and the World. You may also be drawn to the reading that goes out today about kind of spirituality, astral travel, those kinds of things, because some of these issues are echoed there. I don't think you have the fears that other people have about going deep with spirituality. I think in the past you may have resisted a call to something, perhaps because of material concerns, perhaps because of this kind of background over here, and you have, for one reason or another, gone past that mindset of limitation, or busted through those self-concept issues, or overcome those fears. With the Seven of Stakes, I think you may have been in a defensive mode, and you have now come to an understanding. And I'm noticing that these figures are kind of stood in hell, right? They're looking at each other in a hellscape, and I think it won't resonate for all, but for some of you, you've been to hell and back, and that has made you completely unafraid to explore the spiritual, the magical, all of that kind of stuff, because you already know that you have the resources to follow any calling. I almost want to say, with the Judgment in reverse and with it being on Yonka, that you have resisted the temptation to fall into vengeance thinking, or to fall into, I'm going to get so much money or status to show so-and-so, or to prove this to this person. And in realizing how dangerous those kinds of mindsets are, you embarked on a more spiritual path, which I now think is kind of your world, or is making your world a more vibrant and varied place to live in. You may also do spiritual stuff through the internet. Again, some of you are readers, right? Hello, welcome. And I think that there's some form of protecting other people, whether it's through talking to others about creativity, about addiction, about wearing many hats, about not grieving things that you're meant to step away from, these kinds of things. Whether or not you do that for a job, there's a sense in which you do it, and it's a resource that's available to you. I also want to say that working online, although it's not in your work sector, is a huge thing, and that is a resource that you can tap into. I think you're quite technologically savvy, whatever age bracket you fall into. I think that you've got skills in that realm in a way that your peers don't necessarily have. You might be able to manipulate the algo fairly easily, or you might be somebody who's just got a knack, even if you don't know logically what you're doing. And I think that that is perhaps the next stage of this journey for you, or that there's some kind of alliance with other people online. Hello, hit me up. Where, again, you're following an inner vocational calling in some fashion, whether it's just in terms of expressing yourself or it's a broader purpose, because you're stepping away from defensiveness and fear about certain paradigms that you were living under, and realizing that actually hell is something that you kind of make for yourself, or hell is being in that place of fear, and you're pulling your old mindset into the future, and you're manifesting instead a broader world for yourself. Okay, let's look at your intellectual or academic educational resources, that kind of thing. We've got a Seven of Pentacles, so you're very reflective. With it being a demon in this card, I feel that this may have come from hypervigilance or rumination in your past. You may have had the kind of childhood or the kind of early 20s kind of an area where you have to reflect on things with regularity in order to stay safe from elements that would judge you, or that would pull you into temptation, or otherwise be kind of a threat to this creative agility which you've demonstrated, right? I think you're very aware that to the extent that you're admired by others, there is also a sense of jealousy or a an unconscious intention from others to hold you back, and that has made you somebody who reflects on their progress at all times, who checks in with themselves and their emotions very regularly, and who I want to say who is very grateful. You might have a gratitude practice, or you might just have a good awareness already without me speaking as to what your resources are, but from a very logical place, a very systematic place. You may be a diarist, a journal keeper, someone who blogs or vlogs about what is available to you or what it is that you've experienced. But again, because of this guy, I feel like there's some sense that that comes from pain in your past, or addressing what you frame as lesser impulses within the self, and sort of trying to talk about that. For some of you, it was being born into a situation where there was a lack of privilege for you, but you had to keep up with privilege, right? You had to appear as prestigious as those with advantage. And it's that fake it till you make it type thing. And that has meant that in your approach to absolutely everything, you've become very intellectually systematic. You are good at formulating a plan in a tight spot, I want to say. With the King of Swords or the King of Scythes, and with this being, I think, the Mayor, firstly, again, you're a leader, but a thought leader specifically. I think you come up with new ideas, again with the writing, that inspire other people, or you could do that in your future if you're sort of considering career moves. I also think you might be quite academically respected, just because this is from the graduation ceremony scene, and although that episode doesn't end well, there is a sense of standing up and making speeches. You might be somebody, if you're on the older side, who's been called back to an institution to speak as an alumni, or to kind of, what do I want to say, to kind of prove the efficacy of a program that you've been through, or speak to your experiences in some way for people who are undergoing education, or going into some kind of mentorship in a way that you once did. This could be as simple as you've taken a course to start a business and you're now successful in that and you're recommending that to other people. It doesn't have to be directly educational, but it certainly relates to the intellect. And I think that journey is one of your resources, that the ability to tell yourself or affirm to yourself your intellectual confidence from that place is something that you can draw upon when you feel less than confident, or when something is particularly a mental challenge. And I'm hearing for some of you, you've overcome physical difficulty or disability, by using mental grit, and you can kind of return to that journey whenever there is something challenging in a different way in your life. You may even be someone who's spoken or written about those experiences for other people, and that's partly how you make money, right? But there's, with this congratulations sign, class of 99, I think it was, there's something here, there might be something about the year 99 for you. I don't know whether that's when you're born or when you did something specific or whatever. But there is a congratulation from the universe as well, of like, you did it, and one of your resources is that journey. Again, that sort of turning away from stuff that wasn't appropriate for you, but also the mental agility that it took, and the mental development and the processes that got you here. With the Three of Cups as well, I think, again, it's not in your friendship sector necessarily, but you have some very intelligent people around you, or access to extreme intelligence, right? In terms of your peers, your contemporaries, maybe people you work with, certainly people you have access to online. The people that you either do or could have fun with are very clever. And I want to say they have a good sense of fun because of these sunflowers. So if you're someone who does feel that loneliness that we spoke to earlier, what I want to say to you is look to the people who you are intellectually impressed by, and actually they'll be the most fun for you right now. And this could be in terms of like sliding into the DMs of people who are your heroes online, or hitting up people who were linked to an institution that you've been in, or who have taken similar courses or done similar things. Or if you're, at a book signing of yours, speaking to your contemporaries in that way. I think if you do feel a loneliness, it's more because you're between worlds than because you don't have people around you. Because one of your resources seems to be people. Maybe I'm telling you because you don't always feel like you can ask, because you are quite individualistic. And there's when you're around intelligent and creative people, there's often an urge to bond over collaboration, and I don't think that you're the collaborating kind. That doesn't mean that you don't play well with others. It just means that you know that you work alone very well, and it's almost like you want to avoid this energy of offending anybody by turning them down on that level. But what I want to say to you is, you could suggest to these people, like, I do better making stuff by myself, but what I do want to do is hang out. What I do want to do is party. What I do want to do is have dinner with you, or whatever it is. And that will actually get you further in what you're doing and help them to further what they're doing. So that is one of your hidden resources. Now, the fifth element in all of this is actually your inner world, your inner grit, your inner personality, which in your case we have touched on, but let's take 3 for that as well. So we've got a Queen of Cups in reverse, a 9 of Cups in the upright, and a 10 of Wands, and I want to take a Lovers for clarification. Okay. Something here pertains to your romantic life, which is why we've got Willow and Tara just here. Particularly if you're a musician, particularly if you have been in same-sex connections at any stage of your life, there's something about that coming up here in terms of what it taught you and gave you with your inner resources. For some of you, and this is a tiny amount of you, there is a very specific message that somebody that you loved a lot passed away, perhaps someone you were in a romantic relationship with, and one of your inner resources is that you still have a dialogue with them in some fashion, or the synchronicities that you experience are a result of that bond you still have with them. But again, that won't resonate for everybody. It's just confirmation if that was something you suspected. Queen of Cups reversed, you are able to distance yourself from your own emotional lesser impulses in a way that is very admirable, because this in the upright, yes, it's an emotional card, but it would also be a vengeance demon, right? So again, it's that thing of you've left that mentality behind. You're not here to compete. You're not here to get revenge. You're here to have success on your own terms. And that is a deep inner well that you can draw upon, but is also a mechanism that stops you from getting out of control if the things around you are triggering, right? With the 9 of Cups, I think you have a very good idea of what your dreams, your wishes are. Again, with the Master Manifestor stuff, you're someone who has a very clear picture of the kind of future that you want. And I think that speaks to your overall experiences so far. But that kind of clarity is something that other people have to work at. And I say that from experience and also from client experiences, right? We can't all have that inner Pinterest board of what it is that we desire out of life in a very sort of quick upfront fashion. I think you're a person who, if I said, what's your bucket list in this aspect of life, you could give me 100 things off the top of your head. And so many people struggle with the direction that they're moving in a way that you just never have, right? You've always been sure of yourself. Whether or not that is translated well and people have tried to make you feel insecure, I think you know where you're going, or you know what you want, right? I also think you're very good at visualizing because of these screens in the background, and because of the fact that this speaks to a kind of law of assumption type mechanism in thinking about where it is that you want to be and just kind of being there in the moment. If you're not someone who's looked into Neville Goddard, I recommend you looking into, I think it's called SATS, State Akin to Sleep. His technique of kind of visualizing your ideal life just as you're drifting off in order to make that your present reality. That is a resource that's available to you as well. And then with the 10 of Wands and the sort of image contrasting with the traditional meaning, I think you used to be someone who had a lot of problems that you carried around, again, possible trauma background, and now you're somebody who uses the skills of those particular problems, the stakes that were the weight to carry, to just blast through whatever happens next, right? Your mentality is not, I'm carrying all these things, I'm a victim, I started out at this place, I've got these limitations. Even if that used to be your mentality, I think that now the idea is more, everything that has happened to me has given me another weapon in my arsenal. Everything that I have experienced has taught me how to handle the next thing. And I think that speaks to your efficacy as a person, as a manifester. I want to say for some of you as a witch, right? But it is also a resourcefulness that translates very well into the practical and into the realms that other people accept a bit more easily when they don't want to kind of delve into the woo. So I hope that was helpful to you, Pile 1. If it was, please let me know in the comments what resonated. Like, subscribe, ding the dong, thank you kindly. I'm a small channel and I'd like to get big. So with you being such notorious beings, shall I say, with you having such a broad fan base, I'd appreciate you passing this on to whoever you think that would find use in it or utility, and just, you know, engaging with me directly. That'd be really cool. But I hope to see you elsewhere on the channel. There's all kinds of playlists to check out, and do check out the YouTuber playlist if you haven't, because I've been uploading an equivalent video for every day this month, even if it's not been on the day, so there's plenty to check out there. But what I want to say is keep doing you. Absolutely draw upon all the stuff we've talked about. I'm proud of you. Spirit's proud of you. You're absolutely bossing it. Take care. Hello, Pile 2. If you chose the VAV deck, this is your reading. I am speaking slightly more quietly than I normally do, just because I'm filming this quite late at night and I don't want to disturb my neighbours. There are also, I don't know whether you saw the intro, but there may be sound problems on this one. I really apologise if that's the case. I feel like this information is worth getting out anyway, but I've got a bit of a problem with the cord that connects my mic to my recording equipment at the moment, so just bear with me if there is any, if the way that the sound is coming through is atypical, shall we say, or if you're hearing me through something less clear than a mic, I do apologise, but I'm going to trust that you can turn the captions on and that we'll have something good to say anyway, right? And we're going to look into kind of 4 elements that relate to the resources available to you. Wow, these wanted to come out. And then also to the 5th element of kind of how you deal with things on the inner. So let's get some more. What do we want for the next element? A couple of things to say. Firstly, this water stuff wanted to come out. So your relationships and your emotional life are particularly relevant in your reading. You may be water dominant or a water sign, and that's sort of confirmation that that's why, but equally you could be someone with a totally different kind of chart where that stuff's just extra important for the moment or pertinent for you to know. So we'll see. So that one and this top one, and then we'll get the rest in just a moment. The other thing to say is that between piles I went and used the bathroom, and the soap dish was almost empty of soap, and I was kind of scraping the last stuff out, and the thought I had was that one of my resources is that I'm very good at using things down to the last bit, right? And I think that may speak to you, and that's why I'd sort of had that thought, is that you may have had times where you weren't as materially abundant and you've had to kind of, you've been down to your last slice of bread, or you've been down to your last few pounds in your account, or dollars, or whatever it is. And you've really made those resources go further than a lot of people would have. That's not to say that you will stay in that circumstantial materiality, but it's to say that that period may have happened for you because you needed to be extra good at adapting in a material way. But we're actually going to talk about materiality first, so let's discuss these cards. We've got a Page of Swords, a Knight of, I want to say Wands. Yeah, a Knight of Wands. And an Ace of Swords in reverse. That's interesting. Okay, so Page of Swords, this speaks to what I was just saying. You're very good at watching your money, right? You may always have an eye on your account or an eye on your incoming resources in a way where every penny that you spend is kind of accounted for, right? Again, I do feel for many of you in this pile that you've gone through patches, if not like on the breadline, then certainly dealing with a lot less in the way of financial resources than your peers or friends at the time. And you have kind of made it look easy, or you've done all right over that period. You've kept going because you were watching your spending, and I want to say in a secret way, because this Ace of Swords in reverse talks about not telling the truth, but I actually feel in your case that's kind of what I'm hearing is like passing as wealthier than you are, or being in circles that have more privilege than you. And again, you might relate back to pile 1 in that sense, but specifically in a financial context for you, I think you had to blend in with people who came from financial privilege or who had more of an income than you did for whatever reason. And you may have been struggling at that time, but I don't think anyone saw it, right? This could even be hiding from your own family, kind of how difficult it was to split up resources and make sure everyone's taken care of, all that kind of stuff. Because for some of you, there's an element of protection in this kind of ace reversed. But there's certainly a skill with you in not just managing your money, but also making it seem like things are fine in that department. And while I call that a resource, I almost want to caution you in terms of not asking for help, or in terms of not looking to loved ones, because my Venus statue over here is kind of beaming at me, not looking to loved ones to help you out because you have some kind of financial shame around it, or you don't want to talk about struggling, or you feel perhaps that in talking about money in that less than positive way, other people would see you as being financially irresponsible or anything like that. I think you're quite the opposite. I think you're very fiscally responsible. This is quite a practical deck. It's quite down to earth, right? It's what I would have called my pentacles pile. I think you're very good in that realm. And I think that people will realise that if you ask for help, it's because you genuinely need it. And if you are resistant to asking the people around you for a bit of a hand occasionally, particularly when you're down to your last penny, down to your last slice of bread, etc., this resource reading is telling you that the way to frame it for them is to use examples in the past of how it is that you've been in those kinds of situations and survived and come through. Because I think part of it with you is that you're so good in blending in with other people who have more resources or have more privilege or whatever it is, that people just assume you're all right. And part of asking for help and coming across as sincere in doing that is perhaps giving those same people a very compassionate reality check of the sorts of things that you've come up against in the past. Not to say, I'm always fine, I can do it all the time, but to say, hey, I've never made over this much, or I've never actually crossed this threshold in terms of career or whatever it is. And I've always survived up to now, so it takes a lot to ask for this, but Could you maybe sub me this, or could you help me out in this way? With the Knight of Wands in this realm, I also think you're quite passionate about materiality, but not in an unhealthy way. It's not like a status thing. It's that you're a person who's very focused on approaching goals in systematic fashion. There's a big kind of Capricorn or 10th house vibe with this, that you will absolutely do whatever it takes to get to the next stage, and to sort of climb every mountain or fight the next battle or whatever it is, and do whatever it takes to get there, is what I'm hearing. It's like a passion for this perpetual task of keeping yourself going. And when I say perpetual, I'm not damning you to a financial future that's not so great. I'm saying that one of your best resources is actually your tenacity in dealing with the material when it's not so hot, right? And that doesn't mean that you'll always be impoverished or that you'll always struggle, but certainly to a greater extent than pile one, you seem to have gone through patches where it was genuinely hard, and what's pulled you through that is kind of your chutzpah, your moxie, right? In terms of security, in terms of goals, in terms of practical career moves, and in terms of distribution between you and other people, you are very good at survival, is what I want to say. These three cards speak to you having that very strong root chakra kind of path. And from that, you've learnt to be very capable. But again, it comes with a caveat, which is that I want to tell you not to settle into that energy in terms of always having almost like a poverty mindset. I want to make sure that you know that despite the fact that this has brought out really good qualities in you, you no longer have to be struggling to demonstrate to the world and indeed to yourself that you can survive. You don't have to stay in survival mode now. You have learnt that lesson, and this reading and spirit are kind of giving you permission to go into your receiving mode, your abundance mode, your sort of more passive feminine energy, whatever gender you are, where it's all right now to indulge a little, to receive a little, to ask for more, be that in your personal relationships or from the universe, because you've done the opposite. You've been very, again, masculine, right? These are both male figures, and you've taken command of your circumstances in a very astute way. So now that that is overcome and you know that you're good at these goal-oriented, materially driven things, it's time to get into a mindset where you're not striving for safety, but you know that you are safe because you are always adaptable, always capable. Moving into the emotional and social kind of realms, we've got a 9 of Cups in reverse, a 5 of Pentacles in reverse, and I want to say Queen of Wands in reverse. Is that right? Let's have a look. Oh, actually, no, it's a Justice in reverse. I didn't see the scales. That's interesting. Okay. Well, the first thing to say, with this 9 in reverse and the Justice reversed, you've come from situations socially that were very unjust. You've experienced perhaps betrayals. With this 5 of Pentacles in reverse, I'm getting excommunications. You may have been ousted from your social circle. You may have had your reputation tarnished. You may have been ejected from a family unit or a work environment where other people claimed that you didn't fit in for some reason, maybe even connected to kind of passing financially. Or that for some of you, because you did pass as surviving well, people who equally didn't have very many resources have rejected you for being bougie or for being up yourself or prissy or whatever they call it. in terms of you having high standards for yourself and coming across as being perhaps more financially mobile than you were, right? So it's almost like you may not have come from privileged classes, but then when you went to people who were from your own strata, they kind of saw you as doing better than them, or there was hate coming from people in your close circle because of the perception that you were doing well, that you were always fine, that they were just surviving and you were thriving. And as we learned earlier, the opposite is true. But what I'm getting from this kind of journey is actually that this is a resource to draw upon, because you now know what to look for in the kinds of people who want to elevate you versus the kinds of people who want to bring you down. What kinds of relationships are just versus unjust? What are the red flags to look for in people who do not want you to follow your dreams? Because the 9 of Cups in the upright is a dream realized. You're very good now at seeing the kinds of people who don't want the best for you. And I know that that's a rough resource, right? It's not ideal, again, to have come from these kinds of things, these kinds of situations. But I think in a weird way, with this 5 of Pentacles being flipped, what that means for you now is that the next social realm which you enter into, no matter what their financial background and no matter what your situation, will be one of acceptance. I don't think that you'll be... I'm getting a lot of emotion here, and I'm saying I don't think you'll be abandoned again. I don't think that you'll be ejected from a community. Some of you, I'm hearing literal excommunication from a church. So I don't know whether you took a different path or whether that was reputation based or just certain people in that institution being snippy little bitches or what the hell happened. But it's like you were wrenched from something, because it's really activating my heart chakra. And what I want to say to you is, yes, that was horribly unjust. But the resources that you draw upon within yourself to recognise, I'm hearing bullshit for what it is, and to see it coming, those things are now going to mean that the next time you start again, or you make friends, or you enter into a new circle, you will not be ousted, you will not be betrayed. And your discernment in seeing when people are jealous of you or when people don't want your best future for you is going to mean that you only surround yourself with people with an abundance mindset, with the pentacles there. And that's not just in terms of money, but in terms of appreciation, in terms of true spirituality rather than religiosity, and in terms of awe in the way that they view the universe, in the same way that you have awe. Excuse me. Hiccups, so confirmation for that. Let's move forward quite aptly into your spiritual life. So we've got a 9 of Wands. I want to say in reverse, just because of the way I like to put these cards. Then we've got a 4 of Cups in reverse and a Page of Pentacles in reverse. Okay, let me have a think for a moment about how these fit together. So much of this reading is about you having done the shadow work, my love, and you really have. Whatever it is that you came from, you have absolutely worked on yourself to an incredible extent, right? If you came from pile 1, take what resonates from both, but this pile seems more than pile 1 to have not been born with a silver spoon, not necessarily been born with a reputation for natural gifts or natural agility in different realms. Whereas pile 1 seemed to have been sort of living the charmed life in some ways, I think you have really struggled to get where you are. And that includes on the internal and the spiritual. So this speaks to you having done that work, having been wounded in some way and really examined your past for the sources of that wounding and brought them up to be healed. completely independently of how other people viewed that process or viewed you. And again, I think maybe some of this work was done when you were in a period of social rejection. And I want to speak to the strength of you not just doing the hard stuff that so many spiritual people don't bother to do, quite frankly, but also doing it under circumstances where other people were being cruel to you and life was not being abundant, right? And in a way, I think you've also examined the root causes from a self-concept perspective of why it was that you weren't as easily flowing with money, or why it was that your friendships weren't going correctly in terms of the beliefs that you had about yourself and about your capacity for acceptance. I think whether consciously or not, you've done the work on that kind of stuff. With Four of Cups, it's like there's not been an ease in this process. Even though I want to confirm that you are supported by Spirit in this reading, I don't think that Spirit has ever kind of handed you a cup of like, here, this is how you do all this. I think for whatever reason within your astrological makeup or your spiritual contract or however you see it, you've had to find your own way with this stuff. Again, with this kind of seeker's journey, you've figured out the steps to take completely by yourself. Even if you've had spiritual instruction or therapy or anything like that, I think you've still come to different aspects of that completely alone and figured it out along the way. And with the Page of Pentacles in reverse, I think maybe due to this sort of lack of financial privilege at one point, some of the experiences that, shall we say, are available to some seekers in terms of courses, retreats, schmoozing with certain types of people, buying the books, buying the sort of audio materials, etc., to do this work, that's not been part of your paradigm. You haven't had those resources. I'm seeing somebody going to libraries and, using free resources on the internet where possible and speaking to people in a very direct, interpersonal way about stuff, rather than, say, paying for a retreat in Bali with other people from bougie backgrounds, right? That's not to say that you haven't had some of those kinds of experiences for some of you, nor is it to trash those ways of learning about this stuff. But I feel in some ways you're very similar to me, where for one reason or another, a lot of that wasn't available to you growing up. And you had to just kind of scrimp and save for any information that you could get. And again, use your resources wisely in terms of furthering your spiritual development, furthering your education about the self. With the Page of Pentacles as well, it's like, even in terms of your connection with the spirit world, there was some kind of practical restriction that made that less easy for you than it is for other people who aren't as worried about immediate things as you had to be, right? In the sort of Maslow's hierarchy of needs sense, I don't think all of your needs were met for you to then take a deep dive with Spirit on certain things. What I see is somebody who prays a lot, who has a lot of faith, who asks to be guided. Excuse me. Crystals come off the table, so I'm on the right track here. But I'm going to put that on there and say work with quartz if you haven't. Someone who's asked to be guided down the right path because you couldn't just pay to go, on fancy retreats or visit foreign countries to get a realization or whatever it may be, right? It's this thing of, please show me the way in a way that's accessible to me, because I surrender myself to you, but I can't do this from a position of privilege. And I want to commend you for that and say that, again, your resource is that you are so resourceful, right? And in not having things handed to you, even on a spiritual level, you're now very good at developing systems within which you can challenge yourself, within which you can learn. You may be somebody who has constructed a very personal spirituality, particularly if you were ejected from a church, from a coven, from anything like that. I do feel like you've made your own way. You might be a solitary witch or a Christian practitioner who doesn't affiliate with the church in a broader sense. And I'm all for Christian mysticism, by the way, so wicked. There's just something about going your own way here. And the surprising sort of side resource of this is that you could probably monetize the strategy that you've applied in that spiritual sense. So you may not be someone who identifies as a healer or a tarot reader or a light worker in that way, but I think actually in sharing your experiences about how you've come, I want to say, from nothing, and systematically gone through this process of self-healing, and I want to say rehabilitation for some of you, but certainly like asking God and then receiving and then go to the next resource and then doing this and then next thing, and just having trust and faith in that, that's something you can pass on to others, which they would find really beneficial. Okay, so going to your intellectual and kind of mind-based or mental stuff in terms of resources, we have a 5 of Swords in the upright, we have a Wheel of Fortune in reverse, and then we have an Empress in reverse. This is really interesting. I think you are, how do I put this? You have a mental toughness, and I think other people sometimes interpret it as a mindset that's comfortable with conflict, right? You may have read up a lot on strategy. I'm hearing, the Robert Greene book, The 33 Strategies of War, and stuff like that. It won't resonate for all of you, but you're very step by step in the way that you've come from nothing and achieved a lot. I'm also hearing, again, Robert Greene, but also 50 Cent, the 50th Law, or you may identify with 50 Cent, I can't remember the name of the movie, but his journey, sort of coming from nothing and then having to go past all these different obstacles to become the person that he is now. There is a sense of that, of going from the ground up, and it has lent you this nothing can stop me kind of mindset, which again I think others see as confrontational, but I don't think it is, because the 5 of Swords can be very competitive, confrontational. It can be very it can rub people up the wrong way, but I don't think that speaks to you actually being that way or thinking that way. I think if anything you're quite peaceful because of the things that have happened to you. But what I do think is that one of your resources is that people don't fuck with you anymore, right? Because they know that you can get yourself out of a bind in a very mental way, in a very systematic way. And yes, you are intuitive and you receive things from spirit and stuff, but I think other people, if they had to sort of sum you up in some way, would categorize you as mentally strong, right? Tenacity is a word that keeps coming through for you. Wheel of Fortune in reverse, I think you're not really, it's interesting that you're coming from a tarot reading, because you're not really bound by deterministic notions, ideas of fate. I mean, I don't see it as deterministic, as a sort of discipline anyway, and you may share that with me and see it the way I do, but I think if anybody tells you that you're not going to be able to do something, you will say bullshit and you'll do it. Not to spite them necessarily, although it may come across that way, but because you don't think that anything outside of you is the determinant of your existence anymore. And you've come to that through this kind of trial and error process of really tough shit, really hard stuff, to the point where now you are absolutely the master of your own destiny, The Wheel of Fortune in the upright would be like, things could happen at any time. The wheel of fate could turn. And with it in reverse, in the context of the rest of your reading, I'm seeing that one of your resources is that you determine what happens next with you. Now, that can be a double-edged sword, because if you have a lack mindset, particularly in areas like finance, that can then determine your future. So I want to caution you to be sure of this resource and to be sure of the idea that you create your own reality in the ways that you affirm and think about things and the kinds of stuff you expect from the world. But I also want to say I really admire this way that you will not let anything take you down ever again. I wouldn't mess with you, pal too. I respect it. I'm a little afraid of you. And I think, you know, as loving as you are, as receptive and trusting as you are, I wouldn't like to get on your not so great side, right? I wouldn't like to fuck around and find out with you. And I'm sorry for swearing, because I know some of you don't like that, but there is definitely a sense with you where it's like, well, bring it. I'm ready now. I have the mental strength to overcome whatever life throws at me. Empress in reverse is an interesting one for mentality. I think in a way, you don't need luxury because of what it is that you've faced. It's nice to have. I don't doubt that you want to be living that soft life as much as anyone else. But there's a difference with you where if you were again broken down to your last set of resources, be that spiritually, financially, or in terms of your connections and your emotional life, you know you'd be all right. And I want to say that for that reason, I don't think life will bring you down to quite as bad a place ever again. Because you've just learned to survive. Again, it's this survival instinct thing. You may identify with sort of the lower chakras in a really strong way. And I don't mean that to say that you are, you know, less ascended or anything like that, because I also identify in those realms. I'm a survivalist, and even in the colours that I wear and surround myself with, you know, I'm very red, orange, yellow. There's this kind of fiery sense with me, more than there is the sort of typical spirituality stuff of the third eye and everyone being cloaked in lavender and being a light worker and all of that. I'm much more interested in how do we live in this practical, down-to-earth, root chakra, sacral and solar plexus type way. How do we integrate things in terms of our self-esteem, our circumstances, our creative and sexual lives? How do we remain fertile in a barren environment? And that is very, you know, whatever your gender, whatever your views on children, that is an empress kind of a quality, especially when it's in reverse. It's that thing of, even if life in an intellectual sense or in a mental sense is not giving fertility, is not giving gifts to you, you will never be broken down again to the extent that you were. And you never really feel a lack to the same extent that you did. Because now it's like, well, I've done it. I'm hearing the song Rock Bottom Riser by Smog. I'll link it down below. If you haven't heard it, whatever genre you're into, go and listen to the lyrics in that video, because that is your journey, I think. You are a rock bottom riser. And where he says, I owe it all to you, I think you know on some level that you owe it to whatever it is that you believe in, you know, God, universe, I would call it spirit, etc. But you also owe it to yourself. You have had the mental tenacity to come from the bottom and work your way up. So you're very, very good in terms of managing your money, in terms of, you know, sort of being on track with your goals, and in terms of choosing your words around others to make sure that they think that you fit in wherever money is. You're very good in terms of no longer being in a lack mindset with friendships, relationships, close connections, and with weeding out any red flags in that sort of sense. You're extremely proficient in terms of doing shadow work and keeping the faith, no matter what is offered to you spiritually. And your resource mentally is your absolute unparalleled strength, right? If I were to pick an archetype card for you, it would be the athlete, right? Because that speaks to this mental strength that people need to have in overcoming physical circumstance. So if you haven't had experience with that deck, do look into that and into that card, right? So let's go from this and get your final 3 cards, which I think, again, we've sort of already talked about, but this is your last remaining resources on the inner, which is your 5th element. Okay, so, you know what? I've read that wrong. I've read it as an Ace of Swords in reverse, which I was meant to, clearly. And it's a 3 of Swords in reverse. Stepping out of financial heartbreak, because this is an Ace of Swords in reverse. So again, I'm going to repeat the message that I said then, but I'm also going to add to it by saying this is about you stepping away from the idea that going without is a heartbreaking state and that it will be the end of you, and that feeling terrible about your circumstance is something that makes your circumstances worse, when actually, as we discussed, that state of, I want to say, like material vulnerability or tragedy is what made you as strong as you are. So this is echoing that, speaking to that. So we can almost put that card aside, right? Then we've got, I'm going to call this a 2 of Pentacles because we've done a kind of Page of Pentacles energy down here. I know that's not a traditional attribution for this deck. I know that there is another card with the S that is 2 of Pentacles, but I actually read that as the King. I'm weird. Just take it as it resonates. I think, again, like, you have juggled resources. You have kept a lot of plates spinning, kept a lot of balls in the air in the past. And your inner resource now is your ability to manage that in the present and to say, look at all these different things that I managed to get through. Look at the point that I've come to after all of these imposed circumstantial, weaknesses in inverted commas, and how much strength I've brought to the present despite those things. And then I want to say, with this Swords card, it's like, you won't feel as much of a conflict again around this stuff. Oh my God, I've done it. Right. Guys, I promise you, I do know how to read this deck. There's something going on in your reading about different cards being different things, because I read that as a 5 of Swords. I mean, it is a 5 of Wands as well. And that the meanings are very sort of interrelated in the interpretation I gave you, but this is a 5 of Swords, this is a 5 of Wands. So there's an echo of this energy. This is about that competitive mindset and about appearing competitive to other people. But this, even more so, is about competition, winning and losing. Whereas this is the kind of mental tenacity and dedication that can be interpreted by others as aggression, even though it's not. This is knowing within yourself that you have beaten out the competition in some way, and coming to grips with your own idea of what it is that you have won and lost, what it is that you have had victory over, and indeed what battles you have gone through in order to get to the top, and what that means for you. What I'm hearing in my head is dedication. So there is something in terms, confirmation. There is something in terms of your internal resources which speaks to dedicating yourself to a new path, almost as an amalgamation of everything we've spoken about. And with, I don't want to say card misattributions, because I'm doing myself a disservice there, because I think the interpretation was correct. But with these card illusions, shall we say, I think part of your journey has been not just discernment, but the breaking down of illusions in terms of the way other people present, in terms of how certain financial circumstances are supposed to make you feel versus what you actually feel in that time and how resourceful you really are, in terms of the illusions of other people's modes of spirituality and how you're supposed to get there and how much privilege you have and how much to work with others. And then also in terms of, as we said, things around fate, things around free will, things around whether the world around you is barren and how fertile you feel within these supposedly adverse circumstances. So your inner resources speak to a cohesive understanding of the world that you've reached through this incredibly arduous trial and error process, where really you've become the strongest person you know. That's what I want to say. And not just that, but you've kind of beaten out the competition in various realms who have perhaps had more advantage than you, or had a head start in some way, or had what comes across to other people as the trappings of a better mindset, even though actually your mental agility with this Five of Wands, I want to say, is far superior. And I don't like using that word superior because we're all equal on this planet. But certainly your coping mechanisms have been, you have had more efficacy in the way that you've gone about things. And ultimately that is your greatest resource. Whether or not your finances have now improved because of your passion and your ability to omit some of your circumstances around the right people, whether your network is now improving and furthering your cause, which is another resource, whether your spirituality is now completely in sync with who you are instead of other people's ideas about how you should heal, how you should go about things, and whether your overcoming of deterministic paradigms is sort of part of this. I do feel you are your greatest strength. Your journey that we've described here is your greatest strength. This fifth element that we're looking at, you relating to the world, is your greatest asset. And I want to say, I am so proud of you. Without wanting to seem patronising, this is the spread of somebody truly remarkable. Okay? So know that, dwell in it, indulge in it with this Empress energy, treat yourself, pamper yourself in whatever way that is now appropriate to your life. Because I can see that you've gone through it and you've come out as somebody who is not only resourceful in themselves, but who is capable of being a leader to other people because of what they've endured. If you did find that helpful, please like, subscribe, ding the dong, thank you kindly. There are playlists for love readings, for A to Z lucky dips, for all kinds of readings with the sort of subject in the description. All of that. There's a full Utopia playlist as well. If you want to check out any of those things, I would love it if you did. Let me know in the comments how it resonated, what worked for you, what didn't. And I hope to see you in the next one, pal, too. But either way, I think you're the most resourceful person I've ever read for. And that's with limited circumstantial resources at different points, right? So, nice one. Good job is what I want to say. Take care. Hello, pal 3. Let's get a reading as to your resources in the 4 elements and indeed the 5th element, which I'm told to keep kind of secret for now. So we're using the Tarot of the Divine for your pile. The sound on this one may be a little quieter than you're used to. I am currently unclear as to whether there's a problem with my mic, and I'm also having to be a little quieter than I usually am because it is very late here and I don't want to disturb my neighbours. So please do forgive any sort of interruptions or fluctuations in sound at this time. I will try and sort out some of that in the edit, but also if you can't hear me, please do turn the captions on, right? Or if you're just hearing snapshots of things, I'm really sorry. It's pretty unavoidable for this reading, but there is a full Utoba playlist with other readings if that is an issue for you, okay? Alright, pal 3, let's begin with your material or financial resources. What I want to say with this High Priestess in the upright over here is that first off, you may be somebody who directly makes money from your intuition, your spirituality, your internal agreement with self, if that makes sense, your kind of emotional and cognitive cohesion in some way. So you could be a healer, you could be a therapist, you could read also tarot, or there's something here where I want to say the feminine arts, and I don't mean that you have to be feminine identified for that to apply, but there's something about things that were traditionally designated as female that is crucial for you. For some of you, it's herbalism or midwifery or something like that. And for others of you, you may be a poet, or you may make money through something to do with books, literature, because I think this one is Shahrazad, so it's like a storytelling thing. I mean, for some of you, you're a female filmmaker, which is absolutely rad. Please hit me up in the comments if that's you. But there's something here where you're tapping into a deep well of self-awareness, spirituality, creativity in order to make money happen, right? And it's slightly different to Pile 1, although it has a similar accent, right? Pile 1 were very creatively prolific, whereas I feel that whatever you're doing has more of a healing modality to it, whether or not you're conscious of that. I think that you're very good at this, right? Shahrazad is one of my favourite characters in anything. And again, her skill in storytelling saves her life. So I do think that you might be the best in your field at whatever it is that you're doing. And I don't say that lightly, particularly in a resource reading. My knees are getting really irritated by sort of moving closer in case there are mic problems. And what I want to say is that, like, the things that you write or create or think about or say make people weak at the knees. And that is one of your greatest financial resources. With this Four of Swords and it being a sort of werewolfy kind of character, what I want to say is also that you make passive income. So you may be somebody who's published books, or you might do something that's in a healing modality, but then you also sell product that sort of comes off the shelves whether or not you're investing in it. So for those of you who are readers, you might also run a spiritual shop, or I don't know, if you're a healer, you might sell potions of some kind, or there's just something going on kind of concurrently to what you do that is also passive. For some of you, you are also tarot tubers, and you get money from like ad revenue or something like that at the same time as you do very direct paid readings or sessions with people. And I think if you do something therapeutic in the realm of like psychotherapy, psychology, that kind of thing, you might get passive income from people taking, I want to say, course materials that you've written or books or something like that. There's something going on here where if you're not already producing things that generate passive income, you absolutely can. And part of the reason I'm telling some of you is because you're in this active mode, but you've not necessarily set up the passive thing yet. So this is your nod from spirit to get that going, particularly because something about this wolfish figure being tied up gives me a vibe of someone who's not always in the greatest of physical health. That's not a warning if it's not something you know about, but for some of you, this is a confirmation that you've had time away from being able to work because of either physical or mental health issues. And you've kind of been in a panic mode like this wolf at the time that you've had to rest, that life has made you step away from these things that you do. For some of you, you're energy workers and you're like me, where you've had, I want to say, blowback in terms of your own health conditions because of the amount of energy that you've taken on within a certain time. Like even within this Utober thing that we've just been doing, I had about 6 days off, which I'm now making up for in readings today, where I was in hospital because of long-standing health conditions, but also, from my perspective, energetic overload, because I'm not used to reading multiple times every day for people in terms of public content and private clients, right? So there may be something like that with you, where you take on the energy of other people for what you do, or in an energetic context, or even in the context of research for what it is that you write or create. And you've reached points in the past of burnout, either in a physical or a more sort of energetic, mental way, and had to take time off. And it's in those times that passive content or passive income would be the most beneficial for you. So again, if you haven't set that up, now is the time, right? Write that book, generate that course content, stick your stuff on YouTube to generate that ad revenue eventually, all that kind of good stuff. And if you have been doing that, this is your confirmation that that is one of your financial resources. Ace of Wands in reverse is an interesting one. Again, for some of you, this may speak to being unable to create at certain points because of health issues or whatever, because the paintbrush is backwards. But this is the magic paintbrush story. So this is something about relating to how people create their own worlds, their own lives within your work. For some of you, you're a kind of self-concept coach, a lifestyle coach, or you could be those things. And this is an untapped resource for you, which is why it's in the reversal. Because the magic paintbrush makes me think of painting your life as you go, inventing worlds in order to live in them. Very sort of law of attraction, law of assumption, or magical paradigm type stuff. For some, you are of a magical ilk, and that wand is like a literal magic wand, and you haven't yet integrated that into your material benefits, shall we say. And this reading is your push to say, hey, if you are also a witch or also a spiritual practitioner, there is some aspect of that can be involved in monetizing your existing work, even if it's just coming out of the broom closet in order to enhance or broaden the audience for your existing output, right? Not all of us are meant to be content creators. Not all of us are meant to speak on magical issues in a broad public way. Not all of us are that far into our magical development to do those things. But certainly I think stepping into the identity of the spiritual, the identity of the magical, even if it's just in the liner notes or an author's bio or whatever, will mean that you tap into a new set of, I want to say, audiences or viewers or recipients of your service in a broader way. Right? You're going to draw more people to you by kind of admitting to that part of yourself. So take whichever meaning resonates for that particular card. But I think all of this links in. And if this is your reading, you will kind of know how that relates. Please let me know in the comments what it is for you, because I'm very intrigued to meet people on a similar kind of path who are monetizing that experience. Now, moving into the emotional and social realms, we've got a Nine of Swords in reverse, a Queen of Wands in reverse, and a Queen of Swords in reverse. I think in a similar way to Pile 2, but perhaps for different circumstance, you've been around people in the past who were fairly elitist. Again, there's also echoes of Pile 1 to some extent, but in a slightly different way. And I think that rather than kind of blow up about that in the Pele volcanic explosive way, you have tapped into the Queen of Wands in the good sense, and you have laughed in the face of their elitism and used it to further your own happiness by contrast. By which I mean that if someone puts you down for something on a social level, you're very resourceful in terms of taking something that would be an insult and turning it into something that's complementary, or something out is through, or banishing by laughter in some way. So, let me think of an example of this. If somebody says, I don't know, it's not really an elitist example, but say, just for the hell of it, that someone calls you bug eyes all the way through school, and they bully you for the way that you look. I think you are the sort of person socially and emotionally who, rather than being really sort of upset by this and going home and crying and wondering if you have bug eyes and, you know, examining yourself in a mirror, trying to do different styles of eye makeup, whatever, you would be someone who says, yes, I do have bug eyes, all the better to see you with, all the better to sort of see who you really are. And then you might play up the roundness of your eyes, or you might have it as your discerning feature. There's a sense of somebody socially who turns what would have been insulting into what is iconic. Queen of Wands is very iconic energy. It's very Leonic, very expressive. I think you're happy with yourself. I think you're happy in your sensuality, in your relationships. I think all the things that you've been shamed for to this point, you now wear proudly as markers of your identity. And maybe if you did resonate with coming out of the broom closet here, it's because that's kind of the final piece to that kind of puzzle. With the Nine of Swords in reverse, I don't think you have much social anxiety anymore. And I want to say anymore because you may have been on a journey where that was the case. Or one of your resources is that you help people who have social anxiety, and in turn, their later social mobility benefits you somehow. So you may have had close friends or family members or even partners who have struggled within a social sphere, and you've kind of coached them out of it using this natural kind of storyteller, healer thing that you have. And in doing so, they've introduced you to people who've been very useful to your growth, to your expansion, to your development, to your fun even, with the Queen of Wands. I think as well with this sort of costume in reverse, this very artificial kind of a feeling with this, you're somebody whose friends are realists, right? The friends that you have to draw upon as a resource aren't people who are two-faced. They're not people who are status obsessed. They're not people who are going to judge you or be elitist anymore, because I think you've been around that, and like pile 2, you've stepped away from energies that weren't right for you, but again in a slightly different way. So I think if we talk about the resources of your current friends, family, romantic connections as people to draw upon, the ones that are most useful to you right now, or the ones to turn to if you're in a point of crisis at any time, are the ones who are real, who are grounded, who don't come across as fake, who are celebratory and do enjoy partying as much as you do, and who are perhaps socially adept in the way that you are, but who in the end don't need a costume in terms of the way that they relate to others. Moving down to your spiritual life, we've got 3 of Coins in reverse, a 7 of Wands in reverse, and a Page of Wands in the upright. Firstly, you are a person who is very skilled with exorcism, right? I've talked about this card in prior readings as being someone swatting away flies, and flies for me being indicative of malignant energies, energy hangovers, things that one needs to get rid of in their life and their environment, in terms of evil eye, in terms of parasitic elements, you know, be they living or not living in the sort of traditional sense. I think, and this person does it so exuberantly. I think you're still in your Queen of Wands energy, any gender by the way, and you're partying and you're living your life and you've got bells on your feet, but you're also swatting away all these negative energies. You're cleansing your space. Some of you may even resonate really directly with a shamanic paradigm where you do literal energy cleansings for other people. Or some of you are exorcists or feng shui practitioners or something else to do with getting rid of old shite and bringing people into a spirit of newness. And I notice I'm getting louder and more exuberant as I talk about this, so I have to be careful because of my neighbours, but also I'm doing that because you bring exuberance with you. You bring good energy in. For some of you, you're also like, as well as space clearers in the energetic sense, you might be KonMari practitioners or something like that, where you organise the lives and environments of other people in some way to get rid of any negativity and bring in potentiality for others. So that's a big part of your spiritual paradigm, and it's a resource you can always draw upon. With the Three of Coins in reverse, similar to Pile 2 again, I feel like you don't need to collaborate with others in the way that you live your spiritual life. I think even if you are part of a group or a lodge or a collective, it's not something that's necessary for you so much as something that you want to do. And interestingly, with these masked figures in the background, what I'm interpreting this as from spirit, even what I'm seeing now, is you might do direct spirit work, spirit contact. You might work with the Fae. You might make, confirmation. You might make crossroad deals or have angelic contacts or work with indigenous spirits of the land in order to do what it is that you do spiritually. Or if that's not you right now, this is your pull to say that that is one of your resources. If you haven't examined your own heritage, your own lineage around indigenous practices and getting in touch with the spirits of not just where you are now, but where you come from, this is your absolute calling card to say, get on that, right? Ancestral work with the land, traditional witchcraft practices for your part of the world are really crucial in your spiritual development. And again, will add to this existing resource that you have as a kind of exorcist figure. And I don't mean that necessarily in a Christian sense, so much as just a force for the positive aspect of destruction, of getting rid of things that are outmoded, outdated, that people have outgrown, right? Seven of Wands in reverse. For some of you, I'm getting that there is a counterpart energy where somebody looks like this or has a vibe like this, any gender, right? And that this person either now in your life or coming in for you as a spiritual counterpart will be really crucial to your spirituality, your development. And if this looks more like you than who's coming in for you, then what I want to say is that a counterpart is either coming into your life soon or is in your life who is going to help you with this spirituality, this calling that you have, particularly to working with an indigenous paradigm, right? But with it being a Seven of Wands in reverse as well, I feel there is a lack of defensiveness with you, which leaves you open to spirit contact. You may indeed resonate with the spirituality reading that I'm putting out today as this goes out, that's to do with forming alliances in the non-physical, astral travel, getting over fears and barriers and excuses against things like clairvoyance, audience, cognizance, etc. I feel like your defenses are either dropping or have dropped, and that you would be very gifted in those realms if you're not already there. And if you are already there and that's something you draw upon, then this is just confirmation that, like, yes, you talk to spirit very easily, perhaps as easily as I'm doing now, if not even more so, right? You have that agility in those realms. And I think if you're not tapping into it, get on that. And if you're confused as to where to start, do take a look at that reading. I'll link it down below. But also look to your counterpart energy romantically for an example of somebody who's doing that work or who's in those realms where you can start. Okay, moving over to your intellectual resources or your mental life. I think that you're someone who is different things to different people in an intellectual sense. I think you can be just as exacting as you are passionate. You're very articulate, but that place of articulateness comes from passion, comes from drive. You may have a very strong Mars in your astrological chart. I know this is Janus, but I'm seeing Mars, right? And it's the passion that you have for words that makes you such an expressive person in that way. Or if it's not words that you identify with, there's something where your love for it, your enthusiasm is contagious and becomes a really great way of expressing yourself. So I want to say again, if you're not drawing upon that in all realms, if you're not maybe monetizing that skill, this is something to look towards. With the Two of Wands as well, I think you're very good at planning. I think that in terms of your communication or your articulation of certain ideas, you could travel very far, or there could be travel opportunities tied to spirituality, tied to storytelling, tied to passive income even, right? So do look into all of that as a resource available to you. With the Three of Cups in reverse, I think that this is an interesting one. I'm going to go out on a limb and say you've been in a third party paradigm, right? I know this is like friendship and celebration here, but because we had counterpart energy and we haven't really had a love emphasis for the previous two piles, what I want to say is that in your relationships up to now, whether or not you've actively been cheated on, and I won't be announcing it if that's you, right? You will already know. But there's always been a sense of being... I don't even like saying this out loud because of my work with Dylan James and the sort of things I'm trying to train myself out of thinking on my own journey. But there's almost like a sense that you thought you were the person that people dated in order to get them ready for the real one or get them ready for the person they were going to settle down with. Examine that mindset, by the way, because it's fucked. But, you know, if you haven't directly been cheated on, there's been a sense of being positioned in that way where you are the bestie or the situationship or the mistress to the quote-unquote real connection for whoever. And what I want to say is that that means that that connection's not for you, and I think you're coming to that realization that it's not actually that you're deficient, it's that you're ruling out people who would be crap for your path. But also in that position of coming from being a third party energy in some way, you now have the mental skills of stepping into what you want, being more boundaried, being main character energy, and advertising yourself to other people as something they should take seriously. And I want to say that's one of your biggest resources. So if you've been feeling crap about this, or if this is a recent situation and you're still heartbroken over it, I absolutely empathize with it. And I want to say, draw upon your friendships because of the sort of card it is as well. But I also want to say it's going to be one of your greatest mental skill sets, because now you're able to express to the world what it is that you want in a much more clear way and basically rule out a lot of trash. Moving forward to the Page of Swords in reverse. Again, all three piles today have a variation on this quality, but I think this speaks to not really having to look at what other people are doing to know what's best for you. You don't have to watch the movements of others to be aware of how it is that you should take the next step into your own highest fulfillment, is what I want to say. And with this person having big hair as well, I always see people with big hair as having big power. That's no shade if you're bald or if you have short hair, I mean I do, or anything like that. It's just that in an archetypal sense, it's almost like your antenna is tuned to the gods in a way that was always archetypally expressed through lots of hair or big hair or crazy hair or whatever. I'm seeing Medusa for some of you as well in a power sense, in the sense of the positives of that archetype. turning other people to stone if they fuck with you, that kind of thing. And there's a sense of like always being so tuned into the broader picture, maybe even to the picture from spirit, that you know where to go and you don't have to look to trends, social media, what your family are doing, what your friends are doing, what your partner's doing, what people in your line of work seem to be doing or should be doing in order to know what your next step is. So that's a real mental strength that you have. Let's get 3 final cards to see the 5th element, which is your inner resources. Oh, wow. Okay. And I want to clarify with this one. So you may resonate with some of pile 2, actually. 10 of Swords is an internal resource, is somebody who's really been through the storm. I don't know whether that was early trauma or later on, but it seems like there's a situation that should have dragged you under, and you have managed to not just tread water, but get through emotional circumstances to the extent that you've seen dry land. And without martyring yourself, without victimizing yourself, without embodying victim mindset too hard. I think one of your inner strengths is that you've been through a lot and come out the other side. So again, I want to say, if you were also drawn to pile 2, that seems to be the theme of their entire reading. So if that card is pinging out to you, check out pile 2 as well, because it's also for you. With Death in Reverse, it's an interesting juxtaposition to this kind of exorcist archetype energy, because the exorcist is almost something that invites death or destruction in the most positive way, right? It expels forces, it sweeps out, it turns away things that are not beneficial. Whereas Death in Reversed is like a hesitancy around letting something go. But I don't think that that's exactly what this is saying. I think that this is expressive of a discernment between what needs to be expunged, either in your own life or in other people's, versus what it is that is not quite done, that needs to be hung on to, that's not dead yet, right? For some of you, this is really specific, so it won't be for all. You are medical intuitives, or you work with the dying, or something like that, where you are very adept at understanding the difference between something that is irretrievably going in one direction versus something that is fixable or something that can be healed, right? There's a sense of knowing when it is literally the time to die, or when the death of a thing is actually the death of an illness or the death of an adverse physical circumstance. Again, that's just for some of you. For the rest of you, this will be about this discernment thing. 8 of Swords in reverse, I think you don't really trap yourself in a mental prison. Again, you follow your own compass in a big way. And with it being donkey skin as well, it's like you don't need to rely too much on your environment or the goodwill of others in order to survive anymore, even if that's a place from which you started. Because for some of you, you did come from slightly more opulent backgrounds than pile 2, or you had a bit more generosity in your early life than perhaps they did. But it's like you don't really need any of that anymore to be aware of what it is you need to do next, because swords are ideas, right? You're not trapped by your own ideas, nor are you trapped by what it is that you have to wear or perform to the outside world, or how your environment is affecting you, whether people in your environment are contributing. It's like, no matter what, you'll be okay. And you always have discernment in these things. With the clarification of the 5 of Coins, I think, again, in a similar way to pile 2, this is because you have had experiences where you've been rejected all the way over the spectrum to excommunicated from certain activities by people that you have then learnt not to rely upon. So you, again, it's like stepping into this sense of self that knows exactly what to do next, exactly how to celebrate, exactly how to communicate, be that with the physical or the non-physical, and how to move through things in a way that is not just discerning in terms of your own life, but actively healing to others. I hope that was beneficial to you, Pile 3. I'm going to leave it there. If you want to check out the rest of my channel, we've got a full Utober playlist of like over 31 little mini readings and pick piles and stuff like that. Then we've also got a playlist for love readings, playlist for an A to Z psychic tombola lucky dip with everything from Marseilles to birdseed readings to ink blots in water telling you stuff that we pick out of a hat with a word at the beginning. There's also playlists of try before you buys if you were thinking of booking with me but not quite sure yet, and all sorts of other stuff on the main page of the channel. So please do check that out. Please like, subscribe, ding the dong, thank you kindly, and hopefully I will see you again pretty soon.